Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Independent City Council meeting. It's Tuesday, October 24th, 2017. It's 6:30 in the evening, and it's a beautiful fall day. I wish we could have days like this that would just go on and on. It's wonderful. Let the record show that council is all here, happy, awake, smiling. There you go. I appreciate that. Okay. You have the minutes of the October 10th meeting in your packet. Do they meet with your official okey-dokey?
I move to approve the minutes.
Second.
Motion second. Discussion. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And opposed. Motion carries. Thank you very much. Under visitor comments, Herb Joliffe. Sir, good evening. Welcome to City Council.
My name is Herb Jolliffe, 618 Luskin Street, and I believe it's ordinance 1550 you're going to be looking at tonight. And I had one question. I noticed that the Planning Commission and the City Council is going to look at it. Has the fire department looked at any possible changes to the equipment facility when you allow buildings to be built higher?
I know that what we're planning to do this evening is just initiate the beginning of a development code review. We're not going to look at any detail at this point.
But at some point in time, I would hope that the fire department is going to be included.
Yes, yeah, the fire department is well aware.
Thank you.
Thank you, appreciate that. Harry Blato, good evening. How are you?
Enjoying the sunshine.
Thank you, sir. Good evening and welcome.
Thank you. I'm Harry Blato, 764 Session Street, and I have some comments. Most of the people, I'm sure, never ever gets a copy of this report that was made by the Countil of the water sewer system. I have some comments on that. But first, I'd like to ask one question. What's the plan for the old city hall? Is it going to be torn down? Are they going to use the parking area without tearing it down? Or
I know the to just answer your question, I know that I don't think we're not tearing it down, and you're going to hear a little bit more about that later. And that parking is public parking.
that's going to be public parking?
Yeah, so yeah, we're gonna retain that back parking lot. The two bays of parking back there, those are gonna remain public parking regardless of what happens with the building.
Okay. It bothers me that the city staff and council throws around figures and money like $100,000 like it's $100 in my pocket. $100,000 to refurbish a parking lot is crazy. I think that all it needs is resurfacing and restriping, and you got a parking lot. I don't think there's anything wrong with the structure, the surface structure, anything like that. I haven't seen it, so I don't know why they want to spend $100,000 for refurbishing the parking lot. So much for that issue. On the report, I want to talk about a few things. First of all, I'd like to reiterate my request that information be provided in the utility bill to the people who are paying water and sewer, what money is being paid and what it's going for. And from looking at this report, I think it would be appropriate for a very concise summary of this report be written or be entered into the water and sewer bill mailing. It don't need to be a great big long one, but a couple of pages. I think that's government in the sunshine that's necessary on something this big. Looking at the first page in MyNet, it's amazing that back years ago we pledged the net revenues of the water system for the repayment of the bonds required to fund MyNet, almost $8 million. That is crazy that we pledged water income to pay for those bonds. I think public should know that. Public, most of them don't know that. And the Independent Civic Center, the Taj Mahal that we're in 2010, did the city council and the city staff not have an inkling that we're going to need a new water treatment system for the city? I can't believe we didn't know that. And yet the city council and staff provided the money in bonds to pay for this Taj Mahal. We could have operated out of the old one and paid for the water and sewer, then built the Taj Mahal. Ludicrous. Absolutely ludicrous. The money's needed for the new water treatment plant, what, I understand, about 9.2 million, and 9.7 million bonds were taken to pay for the city, for this new city hall. Ludicrous. I see there's a notation in the report that city staff wants to add another employee. My question in my mind is, what would the new person do that's not being done today? I can't believe that we have the money to provide for a new employee when we're going to be funding millions and millions of dollars in bonds to build the new water treatment plant. On the water accounts, a number of accounts, there's a statement in here that the accounts fluctuate due to move-in and move-outs. And that's not quite an accurate statement as I understand it. For instance, I was told that once the sewer and water is connected to a residence, it stays there forever and is charged forever, even if the place goes vacant, even if it's between owners. It's still charged. Is that not true?
What I'm going to do is, staff is listening to all your comments, and then somebody will get back to you to answer the questions that you have.
Because if that's true, I'd like to be able to disconnect my water and sewer while I'm gone in the wintertime for 6 months. But evidently this is not true. I don't know where they've got that information.
You know, if you have additional questions,
I have two more questions. There's a couple of places in the report that makes a statement. It's very interesting. And I wonder what it means. Excuse me while I page to it.
While he's looking for what he wants, I'd like to make a suggestion, please, that on the next River City news that goes out with the water bill, that we put a link available to be able to see the report that Harry is looking through right now.
Most people won't look at it. They won't. It's just, a lot of them probably do not have the capability. But
Well, at least it makes it available that way.
I know, quote unquote, it's available, but if it's in the water and sewer bill, the electric company and every other company that provides me with a statement that you tell me what the money is going for, even down to 2 cents a kilowatt hour.
so
I think the city could do that once a year, is all I'm asking.
really like to suggest if you have additional questions, be happy to set up a meeting with staff for you.
Just a second here. There's one statement here which I can't see, but it was written in the report twice, where it states that the city does not spend the money in accordance with the plans that they have made for budgeting. It's made that statement is made in here twice. I can't find it right now. But I wonder what that means. I wonder what that means. Anyway, I won't take any more of your time, but I reiterate, it should be in the water bill, water sewer bill, and not just put online. If the the telephone company and the electric company and everybody else does it, the city can do it one time a year. And the encapsulation of this report should be in there too. Thank you.
Thank you. Next person who'd like to say something is Ann Scheck. Good evening and welcome to City Council.
Well, thank you. Good evening, councilors. My name is Ann Scheck. I live at 613 Cessna, and I'm the publisher of The Independent, also the linking letter, which covers city council sessions, and the linking loop, which covers the school board. And I just wanted to say that in the last linking letter, I was told there was an error, and I corrected it. And it has been corrected in the linking letter that went out subsequent to the first flurry of them. I'm not going to repeat my error. That's something that I don't ever do, but it will be corrected on the next linking letter. And it basically was that the corrected version is that about the recommended rate increase is 2.5%. For potable drinking water and 4.4% for wastewater. And I wanted to just take a moment, and by the way, I have Councilors Day and Hicks to thank for this, and that allows me to sort of transition into why it might seem I was a little obstinate to you, if that's the way you interpreted it, about correcting this error. And the reason is because I don't correct any mistake with just a claim that a mistake has been made. And I have very good reasons for this, I think. Frequently, somebody will tell me an error has been made and it hasn't been made. And then if I trust that opinion without a verification, I'm contributing to a second error. And so when the council or anyone has an issue with anything I've written, I certainly welcome it. I think it should be dealt with quickly. I think in this particular case, because it was in electronic media, I was able to do so. But I can't, without some kind of verification, simply say immediately an error was made. And so I thank the councilors for bringing this to my attention. I think it's been cleared up. And I'm glad to be able to talk to you in this way from a podium tonight. Thanks.
Thank you so much for taking the time to do that. I appreciate that. Anybody else have visitor comments? If not, we're going to keep moving forward. Under my portion, I just want to let you folks know that I had a chance to visit with Congressman Schrader on the telephone recently, and he was pretty excited about the things that are going on in Independence. We spoke specifically about the census issue, which I spoke to you folks about last time. He was very interested in that. We also talked about the DACA march that took place, and we discussed that, and he has a real understanding. Also had the opportunity to recently spend considerable time with our new school superintendent, Jennifer Kavista. We had a wonderful conversation. I'm very optimistic about relationships in the future, and really am glad that she's part of our community. In your packet, folks, there are two, I'm recommending two folks to be placed on the Parks Commission, Sue Barker and Kate Schwartzler. And we have some vacancies, and does that sound okay with everybody?
I know both of those folks, and first of all, they're bend over backward community volunteers, and I would highly recommend them, and that's a motion if you'd like to accept it.
Thank you, I will.
I would second.
Have a second, it's a motion, second, discussion. Everybody okay? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And opposed, motion carries. We're going to go to council liaison reports. Councilor Linscott, anything from the library?
It's going to take like 3 hours.
Okay. We'll order pizza.
Okay, we had a meeting yesterday, and this is what I heard yesterday. And the summer reading total signups was 114. Last year was 132. And they will be exploring changes to increase participation as we are planning for 2018. Summer reading program attendance was for 2017 was 2,615, and last year was 2,310. Another added program this summer were the Solar Saturdays, a series of families art programs for all ages. Attended varied, but overall they were very well received. And then Leanne came in to share the library volunteer statistics with the board. In 2017-18, the library had 79 volunteers who worked 3,181 hours. So,
Great. Did you want to keep going and do the Winnipeg report while you're at it?
we didn't have a meeting because some of the officers were, they had other meetings,
Okay,
so we didn't have a meeting.
okay. Thank you, appreciate that. Councilor Martin for the Heritage Museum.
I will start that in just a second. I have a question for Councilor
excuse me.
Linscott. Who is the chair of the Winnipeg board right now? Is it still John Oberst?
No, he rides the bike. Marshall.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much.
Yeah, he's the president.
Okay.
And he's getting
That's all we
us-
need. He rides the bike.
Yeah, he's getting us in shape.
Councilor.
The Heritage Museum has met on a regular basis, the Heritage Society, and they are very engaged right now in the grand opening or the grand reopening of the veterans portion of the museum. Probably the most interesting thing that happened since the last time I reported was that I was invited to take part in a paranormal investigation, which was held in the basement of the museum. And I stayed for about 2 hours. I understand that the group that was there stayed for another 3.5 hours beyond what I lasted. And whether you accept it or not, they found, and I would put this in quotes, evidence. So that's the first time I've ever gone to a paranormal investigation, and without this assignment from the council, I would have never had a chance to experience that. So thank you.
Not quite sure what to say to that. That's a nice touch. When in doubt, say thank you. There you go. Okay. Mr. Irvine, you're the fill-in for the city manager today, and your report.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. So really, I just have a couple of quick items, then we can move on to the other staff we'll be presenting. First, with reference to the old city hall, we have executed a lease for a portion of that property, which will bring a distillery to the community. It's a company that's been operating in Washington for 5 or 6 years. They're looking to relocate to the area to be closer to daughter and grandkid, which will be coming shortly. The company name is Dry County Distillery. They're still deciding whether or not they're going to swap the name once they move here, but it's a pretty exciting development forward for our community because the distillers are pretty good tourism draws. The lease is with the explicit understanding that we are continuing to market the property for sale. And to that end, we are actually talking to a couple of different folks about that possibility as well. So things are in progress there. Just kind of an FYI, we're going to be bringing sometime in the moderately near future, we're going to bring to you a request to change work hours for construction. Currently, they are 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. 7 days a week. And we're going to, I think, see if we can request that you all dial that back a little bit on the weekends to give folks a little better chance to sleep in sometimes. So that's just kind of a heads up, that's what's going to be coming. Then lastly, you may have seen Public Works has been out trimming trees. I think they spent the whole last week really out there hitting it hard. And then they also are putting a survey out for the drinking water program this week as well. So they're definitely staying busy. With that, unless you have any particular questions, I can introduce the next staff presenter.
I just had a quick question on the distillery. Do we have a timeline when we might see some activity there?
Like today. They are chomping at the bit. They're to transfer their TTV license from Washington to Oregon. It's going to take a few months. In the meantime, they're going to be working to get the space ready for them so that when the license comes through, they're going to start operations immediately.
And what was their name again?
Dry County, I always try to say country, Dry County Distillery, and they're from Marysville, Washington right now.
They have a nice looking website.
Yeah, like I said, an established business, quite a bit of distribution in the Washington area. They're excited to explore the markets down here.
Do they have any idea how many employees they will hire in the next 6 months or something? How many are going to be involved in the moving?
Yeah, so I mean, really, it's going to be it's kind of a husband and wife operation. So for now, it's going to be more than likely the husband and wife, and there's the daughter as well, kind of working on it. They're going to be open probably 5, if not 6 days a week, open and operating, offering tastings. They do tours. They do a lot of that kind of thing. So, but
Are they going to be selling also there? Selling to the public?
I believe so. That is the intent. They'll obviously, most of what they sell will be through a distributor, in the liquor stores, but obviously having a retail outlet there is a benefit for the business as well.
Thank you. Okay, you want to make the introductions?
Yeah, so with that, we try to bring Rubio, our outreach liaison, in here every several months or so to give you an update on what's going on in the outreach world. So Rubio, come on down and talk a little bit about what you've been up to.
Good evening, nice to see you.
Good evening, Mayor. Good evening, City Councilor. I made a presentation for all of you to see the work that I've been doing. Let me get a quicker.
Rubio.
Yes. Great. So last time I did a report was on July 11th, and I have done some things since then. So let's see. Okay. What we did recently was the Festival Informativo that happened on September 24th. There's a picture there. About 80 people showed up. There were 15 service providers that were there with the tables. We were able to raise about $1,500 worth of raffle prizes from local businesses, and that was a really good turnout for people to have raffle prizes and be able to have a good time. We provided food, and it was really good. We did collaborate with Northwest Senior Disability Services. Zaida Delgado was my co-host, and she was able to coordinate the whole event with me. So we had that, and it was a great success. 80 people were able to come, and they had a good time and be able to take away some good information for themselves. Also, what we did recently, we did a OCCMA workshop, and that was really good between the cities of Tiger, Newburgh, Woodburn, and Metro. And myself, we were there and able to talk about best practices, community engagement, and the whole conversation. Great turnout and great questions we had. I did finish the STEM summer camp, and that was on those days, in that week of July 31st to August 4th. About 60 kids participated. They were able to play with the STEM curriculum, and they were doing the egg drop for like space, when they were going to drop have a waste, creativity ways to protect an egg on a drop. And they were able to do the test, and they were really excited to see the drop, and the egg didn't break or it did break. So that was really exciting for the kids to have. And it was a great stimulus for the kids' brain to come up with ideas or imagination or creativity to create any other things that they can profit from in the future. We did CERT en Español, which was from September 15th, 16th, 23rd, and 30th, and those were on Saturdays. I did have contact over 20 people, 12 people showed up, and then throughout the weekends, about 5 people graduated. So I have 5 people that are now able to understand the whole curriculum of CERT, and they are bilingual and bicultural, and they'll be able to participate later on with the main CERT team. What we're doing right now, I'm still working with Mi Tierra project, which is about C2 Supper. So we're collaborating with FHTC and also Marion Book Food Share. They want to do a C2 Supper class again in next year. So we're prepping for that. And also we are prepping to create more action items to create community gardens and bring in other nonprofits to help out with the action items. Whatever that is on the works, and we're working on that right now. What we also happening right now is called Table of 12. The essence will be 12 people coming in, Oregon Community Foundation. They have a Latino Partnership Program department that they're reaching out throughout the state of Oregon. And they did one in McMinnville, and now they chose us to do one here. So we're doing that on November 3rd. And that's co-hosting with Arturo Vargas, and so it's 12 leaders, and it will be November 3rd from 6 to 8 p.m. That's happening then. And one of the exciting things that is happening, as you have heard before, we had the round table, and the round table has been formed and it's changed in names. It changed its name to Access Independence Task Force. And I hand out a piece of document with Karen that those are the names of the people that are participating in these type of meetings. We meet on the first Friday of the month. We started in June, and we were storming and forming, and that's how the name came about. And so it is composed of community leaders that live in the City of Independence. And these are the vision and the goals. So the vision essentially is using the city strategic plans to help out. And specifically is for access and independence to help the city with the efforts for the strategic goal number 4. It will be to help out and identify barriers for participation, access, and engagement. So that's a really great group to have. They have great ideas, they have great intentions, and so we're going to continue to work on that. Next meeting will be on the first Friday of November, and we have a meeting scheduled with David and Sean to be able to continue the conversation. We're continuing to invite more people because they want to get to know what our resources we have for the independence and be able to bounce ideas back and forth. We did have a meeting with a recorder, Sergeant Banuelos from the police department, and Adriana from the school district. These are the goals for Access Independence Task Force is participation, access, and engagement. And part of the participation, the thing that you see there is a survey that we're working on, and that still is a draft. It's a draft that we're working on and be able to see how can we figure out a baseline for people to know what is their access points. So that's something that we're working on, and that's the next thing that they're eager to work on. I've been engaging with different groups. I am not a member for the Rotary here in Independence. I was able to teach some units with the main classes with Kimber. And that was, we finished the last Saturday. That was the last class that we had for October. And that was about 24 people who graduated from that class. Do participate in the youth forums that happen quarterly meetings. Service integration teams, I go there every month. I'll be able to connect with most of the service providers for Polk County. I connect with most of the nonprofits here in Independence already, so I'm able to collaborate and make connections and be able to see what we can work together. And also I have worked with Western University, Chemeketa, and the school district to see how can we help out with the education piece for the city. Also, I have worked with the St. Patrick Church, and they have citizenship classes. I was able to talk to them and be able to tell them what is my job with the city, and be able to be there to ask them to answer any questions they might have. We have the quinceañeras. Every year they have different groups coming in for the church, and they make them to see through kind of classes from 8 a.m. to 11 a.m. on Sunday. So I was able to come in, and I brought David and Sean to be able to connect with them as well as members of the community, as they have to be on that spot for the quinceañera. So it was a great setting for us to communicate and that connection. The new idea that's coming up is youth engagement with the youth for the church, and that's something that I'm working on right now. That is, I'm just talking to the acquired lead for that, and so I'll let you know what happens after that. And that's all I have.
Questions for Rubio? You staying very busy?
I am, yes.
Thank you so much for your efforts. I know you're reaching out to a variety of different groups, some that you've mentioned here and the others you're trying to make connections with. I really appreciate the outreach efforts. Thank you so much for taking the program.
Thank you.
Okay, and Mr. Irvine, you and Zach are the next presentation.
Yeah, I think I'm just going to mostly introduce Zach here and let him do the hard work. I don't believe you all have met Zach before. He's our contract planner through AKS. He's been with us for a while. We kind of saw there was a fairly light agenda today, so we thought this was a pretty good time just to introduce him to you and give him an opportunity to kind of give you a little background on development that's happening currently, kind of where things are heading for the future, just really kind of a general update about development in the community. So with that, I'll turn it over to Zach here.
Well, good evening. My name is Zach Pels, Mr. Mayor and members of council. I'm a new contract planner, as Mr. Irvine pointed out. It's nice to finally put some faces to all of the names I run across in kind of my daily activities. So thanks for allowing me the opportunity to do this tonight. Like Sean said, we want to take this opportunity with our change in the community development department to give you a quick update on the state of development in the city of Independence, and to familiarize you with kind of some of the things we have currently going on and some of the things that we expect to come down the pike. So I've been here since June of this year, since your former community development director, Mike Danko, retired, and as you are probably all aware, Mike's duties have been split up kind of amongst your new public works director, who is Kai Cottom, and myself, and we're kind of managing those responsibilities jointly. So over the next 10 or 15 minutes, I want to just run through just a quick presentation that talks about some of the development that's going on in the city of Independence. If I can get this to advance.
Let's see if that.
There we go. So really I want to talk about three things. So three different but related topics. I want to kind of just hit on some of the local and regional population and housing trends that kind of informs the planning work we do here in the city of Independence. I want to just really quickly illustrate some of the key development projects that we have underway, and then finish up with a 30,000-foot view of the Southwest Independence concept plan. I'll save some time at the end for questions, but feel free to jump in anytime if you have any questions along the way. So getting right in, because population and demographic changes really impact such a big part of the work we do in the community development department. I wanted to just spend a little bit of time showing you some illustrations about some of the statewide and countywide changes in population. These two graphics that are up on the screen in front of you show, not surprisingly, that population is continuing to change throughout the state and in Polk County as well. And you can see in the image on the right, after accounting for net natural population change and migration, there's significant new people coming into Polk County year after year. In fact, in the city of Independence, over the last 5 years, since 2012, the city of Independence's population has grown by about 8%. So just around 8,600 to a current population of right around 9,200 people. Here's a table taken from the last urban growth boundary expansion the city completed in 2009 that really kind of supports those previous two graphics that you saw relative to Polk County. The city of Independence's population is outpacing growth in Polk County as a whole. Just for fun, I added this graphic that shows the number of privately owned housing units that have been permitted across the country just this last year. So you can see, again, not surprisingly, that Oregon ranks among the top, as do a lot of other states. The Great Plains states are kind of lagging a little bit behind in development. If you can't read it on the screen, I know most of the people in the audience cannot. The state of Oregon permitted about 20,000 new housing units in 2016. So again, population growth is important to what we do in the community development department because it really informs our need to plan for new housing and jobs locally. And so here's a look at some housing trends, both at the state level on the left-hand side of the screen and in Polk County on the right-hand side of the screen. These are new permits or new permit activity for single-family residences, and you can see I think these are especially illustrated. You can see at the left-hand side of both of those graphics a sharp decline at the peak of the recession, and then a steady rebound ever since. So again, not surprising, something we all know. Single-family home activity and development is on the rise. Just some interesting tidbit locally. Our building official Jeff Kennedy pulled some numbers together for me, so I can give you kind of a local look at this. Our local building permit activity is down by about 40% from the period October 2016 to 17 compared to that same period the year prior. I wouldn't really read too much into that. It's just a kind of a 2-year look at where things are at. But I suspect if there is any meaning behind that, it's probably because we're running short on buildable lots. These two graphics just represent the trends in multifamily housing. You can see again, statewide, there's a sharp decline at the peak of the recession and then a gradual rebound. The county experienced a little bit different trend in that after the recession, there was really very, very little multifamily housing being built up until about 2014, when there was a really big surge in new multifamily permit activity. And I think the City of Independence was contributing to some of that too. This is a graphic that illustrates the age of the City of Independence's housing stock. I think it's an interesting graphic that depicts actually, the statistics show that more than 50%, in fact 55% of the City of Independence housing stock is less than 30 years old. So not only does that signify a big boom in housing over the last 30 years, but also a fairly recent housing stock that we can continue to promote for new residents. So all of that to say, kind of where things are trending, and I want to spend just a few minutes talking about some of the development projects that we currently have underway. There's a short list of about half a dozen projects that are currently underway. They're here shown in the red dots on the map. So we've got just over 180 new single-family residential lots included in 3 separate subdivisions throughout the City of Independence. So there's the Great Quail Crossing subdivision on Gun Club Road, kind of the northwest corner of the City of Independence. That's currently underway. That's probably the furthest along. There's 47 lots in that subdivision. Then at the south end of the City of Independence, there are 2 subdivisions that are a little bit further behind, the Brady Meadows subdivision and the Independence subdivision. Those are both moving along. There are also a few commercial development projects that are either picking up speed again, that were approved in the past. Kind of speaking specifically to the Independence Station project, which was recently purchased by a local developer, so we hope to see that taking off shortly. And as you know, the Independence Landing project is picking up steam. We also have the Dollar General project that was recently permitted. So those are some of the more noteworthy projects that are currently underway in the City of Independence. And I just want to wrap it up, I guess, by giving you a 5-minute, 30,000-foot view of two things that sort of feed into the Southwest Independence Concept Plan, which is approved by the city in 2012. And I'll start by giving you a quick summary of the work that the city did in 2009 as part of the urban growth boundary expansion, because that's really what informs the need for the planning work that was done in the 2012 Southwest Independence Concept Plan. So it'll take a few minutes to walk through both of those things. So as you are aware, from time to time, the state will review the availability of developable land in cities throughout Oregon. It's becoming less and less frequent as the state becomes low on funds to review cities' planning efforts. But this effort is called periodic review, where the state is trying to make sure that all incorporated cities in Oregon have at least a 20-year supply of employment and housing land available so that cities can accommodate future growth. And that's really the impetus for the work that the city did in 2009 to expand the urban growth boundary. As part of that work, the city looked at past population and employment trends and decided that they needed ultimately 260 acres of new residential land and just over 80 acres of new industrial land to accommodate the airport's planned expansion and then other industrial land needs. This is a table taken from that urban growth boundary report that shows when you net out for the existing buildable land that's in the existing city limits, you come to a total of about 260 additional acres of residential land outside of the city limits that's needed to accommodate residential, the demand for residential development over the coming 20 years. So once that total area of land has been identified, then it's the city's job to understand or to identify where that land should be located. And there's a number of factors that the state asks cities to use to determine which land is chosen to accommodate that need. Essentially, is it efficiently served by public services? Is it within close proximity to service centers, which means is it walkable or bikeable? And is it efficient to serve the transportation facilities? And also, because of the state's planning system, the state asks that you really prioritize low-value farmland as kind of the first priority, in expanding outside of the existing city limits. As part of that effort, this is kind of a map showing those areas that were examined. The city identified 3 key areas to expand, like that 260-acre residential need and that 80-acre industrial need. The industrial areas are just immediately adjacent to the existing airport to the west, shown in that orange blob that just popped up there. The residential lands are just in the southwest of the city on agricultural land that was kind of the basis for the city's Southwest Independence Concept Plan, which was adopted in June 2012. So fast forward to 2012, and the city, in its ongoing effort to identify available and developable land for future residential needs, met with citizens and other stakeholders to identify a plan that could not only meet the needs of future residents in the area, but also could be kind of satisfy those earlier points I made. It could be serviceable with city utilities, could be accommodated by future transportation improvements, and so on. In the next few slides, I'll just kind of go over what that plan generally looks like and what are some of the opportunities and constraints in the area. So the graphic on the screen shows the real conceptual level land use plan for the area. Keep in mind that the majority of this Southwest Concept Plan area is still outside of the existing city limits and will need to be annexed into the city before the city can apply a zoning designation or do any more detailed level planning. But at this point, the city has this concept plan that can help property owners in the area and other interested stakeholders kind of understand what the city has in mind for development in this area, which is very helpful, not just for existing property owners, but also for those other people that are interested in potentially developing in this area. Just real quickly, the different colors on the map represent the different intensities of residential development that's planned. So the lighter yellow is the lower density residential that's planned for the area. The orange is a medium density residential, and the red areas are the higher density, potentially multifamily residential development that could occur in this area. The white bold lines, it's pretty easy to tell, just represent the network of transportation connections that are anticipated throughout the area to provide movement to and through the area. And you can see one key feature of the site is that it's bisected by the South Fork of Ash Creek, which represents, as we'll see in a minute, kind of a big constraint for the area. One of the big opportunities for the area, real quickly, is just that this large area, almost 260 acres, is under control or is owned by just a small handful of owners. So there's a small number of relatively large parcels that, when developed, they can be very efficiently subdivided because it's not a large number of small parcels that have to, require significant sequencing of development. Usually, large properties can be master planned, street connections can be planned throughout multiple phases of development, as well as utility connections, water and sewer and things like that. And that definitely results in really large economies of scale and efficiencies when it comes time to develop this. Most notably with just the timing of things. So there's a lot less likelihood that you'll see multiple cul-de-sacs and things like that, just because the area can be planned in large chunks. So that's a huge opportunity for the future development of this area. I think that's one thing the city should be really excited about. On the other hand, there are about 30 acres of floodplain that kind of are formed around the backbone of Ash Creek, and that represents a pretty big constraint, as well as some of the wetlands throughout the site. If you can see it up on the screen, the blue hashed areas are all the wetlands and floodplains throughout the site. So while there's opportunities as far as large parcels that can develop efficiently, there is likely going to be a need for significant fill in some of these areas to accommodate new residential construction that is protected from any flood constraints or
If I
flood
can jump
issues.
in real quick.
Yeah.
That's possible wetlands. Those are, they did not do a formal delineation
That's
there.
right.
That was a very kind of high-level survey of there that resulted in that image, so it's not a specific designation.
At the end of the day, I guess the plan lays out three potential development scenarios, depending on the level of wetland impacts that are experienced throughout development. And really, the key takeaway that I want to leave you with on this slide is that this area is expected to accommodate approximately 1,000 to 1,500 new residential dwelling units, which really helps us meet the projected need that we talked about earlier in my presentation. Also, as I mentioned earlier in my presentation, some of this work is moving along. This is an aerial image of the Brandy Meadows subdivision, which is one portion of the Southwest Independence Concept Plan area that is actually in the city of Independence. I believe it was annexed in 2015 or 2016 and received approval for a subdivision on the site in 2016. So they're moving forward. They're currently marketing it for sale. That's where I got these images. But this is a view of the eastern edge of the Southwest Concept Planning area, looking north. This is that same subdivision looking south and into some of the Independence Concept Planning area. But it's moving along. And as I mentioned before, development in the rest of the area will take a little bit more time because those areas have to be annexed and a zoning designation applied to them, infrastructure extended, et cetera. But it is moving, and it's kind of relative to the demand for new housing that we're experiencing. One other thing that, so the plan concludes with a list of implementation actions for various stakeholders, from property owners to the city and other interested parties. One of those items is, one of those action items for the city was the development of a plan for a future east-west connection through the area to kind of open the door for some of the development. And the city, just this last year, moved forward with some of that feasibility work. The city contracted with an local engineering firm to look at the feasibility of providing an east-west connection in the area to promote some future development. So that feasibility study was called something like the Southwest Collector feasibility study. Essentially, kind of takes one bite out of that larger apple that is the Southwest Independence Planning area, and essentially tries to make a connection between 13th Street and Chestnut Street, roughly as shown in this blue dash line here. To make it a little bit more palatable, the project is broken down into two phases. Phase one is the extension of 13th Street, so if the city desires, can move forward with just that phase and open up opportunities for development along that corridor. And phase two would include an east-west connection from 13th Street to Chestnut Street, and would also include a bridge over Ash Street. It's kind of the key next step is identifying sources of funding for this major infrastructure improvement. The feasibility study indicates that that total project is likely to cost between $8.8 and $9.1 million. And it's kind of broken down here, those two phases, including the bridge, are kind of split out. So that's what we're looking at. Again, the city is working with private parties to identify opportunities to move that forward. It's likely, as with most of the development in the city of Independence, that the lion's share of those costs will be made by private development in the area, but there's other sources of funding, system development charges, other transportation funds and grants that the city can use to assist private development in moving forward. So I guess just to sum things up, we expect that, keeping our fingers crossed and assuming the economy remains healthy for some time, we expect this demand for housing to continue. But the infrastructure investment in the Southwest Concept Plan area is one of those key barriers that the city is trying to break down in conversations with private property owners. And with that, I would like to ask if you have any questions.
Questions for the presenter?
Could you give us an update on Brandy Meadows and Independence subdivision?
Sure.
Are they're grading now, is that right?
Independence subdivision is grading. I don't know exactly where Brandy Meadows is. I do not believe Brandy Meadows is doing any grading. I know just last week, and I believe starting the week prior, Independence subdivision was removing some trees and doing site grading. I don't think Brandy Meadows is that far along.
And, wait a minute, okay, and Indy subdivision, how many housing units is that? Roughly?
47?
Independence subdivision, that was 97.
97.
Okay.
What?
97.
97?
You just pull up the script.
Yeah.
Yeah, why don't we just pull it up? Because
I had it written down.
Oh, sorry.
And the access on that 97, if you live in Corvallis, or if you work in Corvallis, you have to go to Maine or Monmouth or something, right, to get there? To get the,
Yeah, you either go down 7th Street to Monmouth Street, or you would go down G Street to South Main Street and head south that way.
okay, and if you work in Salem, you can either go south of the road or hook up to 51 south of here
Yep.
and then come in. And was the wetlands and all this, was that taken into account? Because I guess you were here when when all this decision to build down there with the creek and the wetlands and something else besides wetlands that stands for wet.
Yeah, so that was actually a point of contention at the time, because this is a good example of state departments not communicating or coordinating very effectively. The Department of Land Conservation and Development said we had to consider everything except the stuff that's actually like in the creek. We had to consider as developable, because in theory it is. But of course, DSL, Department of State Lands, which regulates wetlands, has regulations about doing that, which makes developing wetlands costly. So that was part of what we looked at in the Southwest area plan, where we said, well, come on guys, realistically, that's what those three scenarios were, was if you paid for credits for all of it, if you did half of it, if you did another alternative, trying to figure out how many units would actually get in there, because it was significantly less than what the DLCs originally sort of had us determined in 2009.
You mentioned the designation of wetland. Is that study ongoing, or where are we at on the designation of wetlands?
So we are not carrying anything else forward. That's something that a private developer, the property owner, would have to do prior to subdivision approval, is they have to get their environmental permits.
I think it'd be important to remember that most of the Willamette Valley is a wetland.
Yeah,
Yeah,
realistically, that's not rare, what you saw on that map for the Willamette Valley.
And as I remember, as we were talking about urban growth boundaries, that was the dry part of the places we were looking.
Additional questions for the presenter at this point?
Yes, also Independence Station was mentioned as a development project that was underway. Have there been any kind of plans or ideas or concept drawings brought to you yet?
Not yet. Our understanding is that he is negotiating with a couple of ground floor tenants, and if and when he signs them, he'll be coming in. But the plan is for a mixed-use, ground floor commercial, upper floor residential building.
Okay, and do you know whether, and I'm curious because I noticed that something is missing on Monmouth Street. Do you know whether or not the church on 3rd and Monmouth is part of that purchase?
I do not believe it was part of the purchase. Those
Okay.
two houses next to Independence Station were, but the church was not.
Okay, I understand that there's a statue missing on the church grounds.
Which I have understood was removed because of her
Yeah, it's run.
Yeah.
Additional questions?
That was a question I asked you this a couple weeks ago. The Stryker grow site, part of the provisions was that they were going to get they were going to do a noise analysis before, after, and I think you said every 6 months for the next 5 years or whatever. You said that it had been done, the noise analysis had been done, but the city doesn't have a copy of it. And you said, I thought, that you were going to ask them for it. Have you got any results on
I
that?
haven't followed up with them at this point, you're right. And just for the benefit of all the other counselors here, as part of that approval, one of the conditions was that the applicant submit a follow-up noise study after operations begin to make sure that the noise generated by the operation of that facility was within 10 decibels of the pre-development condition on that site. So the pre-development noise study that has been completed, according to the applicant, they told us that, I haven't seen it, you're right, is essentially the analysis that will establish that baseline pre-development condition. The condition obligates them to submit that full report to us after they begin operations, and that report will include that pre-development operation. But yes, I will follow up with them.
Okay, and just so the council knows, the testing would be done by a licensed engineer, and we believe him to be accurate because he's a licensed engineer.
That's right.
So that's I guess it's not unusual to not have, see, I would have automatically said the city would have to be provided that information as soon as it's done. To be able to, in your mind, say, yeah, this makes sense.
Sure. I think one comparison we could draw is for a lot of developments in the city of Independence, we require a geotechnical analysis, and the city doesn't hire a third-party geotechnical engineer, nor do we have a geotechnical engineer on our staff. So we rely on those licensed geotechnical engineers that are hired by the applicants, and they're licensed. They're putting their license on the line when they certify that the information in those documents is correct and accurate. And the engineers, planners, they have ethical obligations that they need to uphold. So I think, in addition to that, I mean, if anything looked really out of line, from time to time we can raise questions about those and get clarification. But yeah, I mean, that's just the way the system typically works.
Okay. If there are no other questions, I think, do you have the next portion also?
Thank you very much. I'm not sure, possibly.
The development code text.
Yeah, I do. I don't have a slideshow for it though, sorry. This one's real big. This one will take just a minute. So you have my memo in front of you. Essentially, with the anticipation of the Independence Landing project that kicked off a few years ago, the city adopted the new downtown riverfront zone in October of 2016. That zone includes a lot of site design and architectural design requirements that will influence the future development in that area. City development officials met with the development team in September of this year to kind of formally kick off that project and talk about the formal process moving forward. As part of that discussion, the project architect mentioned that they may need a little bit taller height allowance for some of the elevator equipment and the rooftop stairs that will access the rooftop. Currently, the code allows that rooftop equipment to be 60 feet tall. They said they might need that height increased to about 67 feet. As part of that conversation, it was also discovered that we might want to consider a little bit wider townhome blocks. That zone limits the width of townhome blocks to 100 feet, which in a grouping of 4 townhomes, which is kind of the intent, would require those units to be 25 feet wide at piece. We thought it might be a little bit better considering kind of the layout of the area and the configuration of Osprey Lane. It's likely that those townhome units will be front-loaded. The driveways accessing directly off of Osprey Lane, make them a little bit wider, 30 feet, and bump that total townhome block width up to 120 feet to give them a little bit more room, a little bit more of a standard width. The third,
What do you mean, a little bit more of the standard width? I mean, what we had before wasn't standard? The one that Topla provided us?
the 25 feet is pretty narrow. I mean, it's not atypical, but it's pretty narrow. A 25-foot wide townhome is pretty narrow. That's about as narrow as you want to go. And typically, I think in those cases you have rear-loaded units where the garage is at the rear, and so the front facade of the building can be just dominated by the front entry. Where the garage is off the front, it's a little bit nicer to have a little bit wider frontage just to sort of reduce that dominance by the garage on the front of the facade. So that's kind of the thought, at least right now. What we're asking tonight is that you allow us to initiate these amendments, and if so, if you approve that, we would come back before the Planning Commission and the City Council in formal public hearings to sort of discuss the merits as to whether or not we really want to move forward with these. But that will give us the opportunity to do a little bit of analysis on these changes, pretty minor changes. The third thing is that we discovered in kind of looking at this section in a little bit more detail that there is a maximum lot coverage of 50% that's applied to all development in this zone. In talking with some of the other community development staff, it appears that that's just an error, and that the intent was originally to apply that 50% maximum to the residential development in the area, and to treat commercial development in this downtown riverfront zone similar to how we treat commercial development throughout the rest of the city, or more specifically in the mixed-use pedestrian-friendly commercial zone, which is that area that's kind of surrounding the downtown Independence, which puts a minimum lot coverage requirement of 50%, which is to say that the buildings on those lots in the downtown core must occupy at least 50% of the site. So again, in talking with the city staff, that appears to be the intent of what the downtown riverfront zone is trying to do for commercial development, and kind of what we've shown as a first draft in this Exhibit A would just be to separate those two different types of uses out, commercial and mixed use with a minimum lot coverage of 50%, and then residential development with a maximum lot coverage of 50%. So just to kind of clarify what we believe was the intent of that original regulation. Again, we're just these are not the proposed changes, or we're not asking you to adopt any changes tonight. We're just asking you to initiate these changes, and again, if you decide to initiate these changes, you will have another look at these amendments after the Planning Commission has an opportunity to review them in a public hearing.
I would interject real quick also, this is pretty typical when you do create a new zone of any type. You try to catch all your details and your errors and whatnot, ahead of time, but as you start applying it and using it, you start bumping into things going, well, that doesn't make sense, or boy, we really should tweak this or loosen this or tighten that, and that's really pretty much what's going on here.
But these are what TOPA agreed to.
So I mean, they agreed to build in the zone, yes, and that's kind of where, and like I said, now that we're starting to run, and not just them, but, you know, looking at other potential developments in that zone as well, that's where we're kind of bumping into a couple of these questions and going, well, that seems reasonable to tweak these things a little bit.
What's the difference between a residential and a commercial? Isn't a townhouse residential?
Yep, that's right, that's right.
Okay, so the lots, what would it be? 2, 3, 4? They're all residential lots.
Correct, yeah.
So that'd be a maximum 50% coverage.
Exactly,
So it's only the hotel that we're talking about?
yes.
Ah, okay.
Well, the hotel and/or Lot 8, the one behind Brew, that's running on C Street. If somebody developed a commercial building there, then this would apply there as well.
Well, also, if they developed the commercial on
the other.
5, 6, or 7.
Exactly.
Which we
yes.
ought to be putting in,
Yeah.
if we're gonna sell them, we ought to put them in multiple listings.
Well, yeah, and so that was the purpose of the zone, was it was intended to be somewhat of a catch-all, you know, allow people to put, because our commercial zone currently allows residential only on top of a ground floor commercial use. And so,
But it's still commercial?
yeah, so that would count as a commercial
Gotcha.
building.
Yeah.
So we wanted, with the downtown riverfront zone, we wanted to allow people to have an apartment building, a pure residential apartment building next to a commercial building without having to kind of parse up and checkerboard the zone, you know, because we didn't know who would want to build what where. And so that's kind of where we ended up sort of melding our high density residential zone with our commercial zone. And that's where we kind of came in with a couple of these you know, accidents.
I recall making adjustments like this to development code before,
Yeah.
when it was a necessity of a single use or an intended use. And based on that statement, I would move to initiate text amendments to Independence Development Code Subchapter 34 as preliminarily outlined in Exhibit A.
So I have a motion.
Second.
And I have a second. Is there discussion? Is everybody okay with moving forward to planning commission will crunch this and then we'll get it back after what their
I'd
recommendation?
really like to see some floor plans, some scale, you know, the outlines of the buildings on the lots when you go forward.
I think we could, you know, at this point, the architectural design is not that far along, but I think we could put together some conceptual sketches of what this height difference looks like on the ground. So you can see, I guess, the effect of essentially that 7-foot height difference and that 10-foot width difference, and then we can.
No, I'm thinking about the lots on the back, 5,
Well,
6,
we're-
7, and 8.
We're also supposed to get monthly reports on the unfolding development of Independence Landing. So those kind of things I know will be coming. We're all interested in that.
So on this, I did have one note on your report, and you spent a lot of time with planning commission and such dealing with setbacks and all of the landscaping requirements. So this additional 10 feet isn't going to impede or infringe on any of those requirements, I'm assuming?
No. In fact, the setback standards remain the same, right? So to work around those, if that is ultimately.
Because several months ago, we spent a lot of time
Sure,
on
sure.
a lot of that, so.
Pretty okay?
I guess I just have a comment though, maybe a little bit what we're talking about with Ken is that there's a better way to visualize what 60 feet, what 67 feet is. I mean, I can't even think of 60 feet where you'd actually be able to see that and what it would. So if there's a way you could present that.
Sure.
Maybe get a little bit better idea of just how high that really is.
I appreciate that comment. I've been thinking about that already. I expect that to be kind of the big question in everybody's mind. Just for your information, this is a tweak to the height exceptions that are allowed for lodging uses. So it's only going to apply to the hotel. And it's only for rooftop equipment. So, and I will definitely put together.
So that's like the elevator shaft. That's the top of the
So it's
elevator.
not going to be the entire
Right, just
area
that-
of the roof. It's going to be a small portion of the roof that needs that additional height to accommodate some of that.
The elevator shaft.
And the only,
Relative to the osprey nest?
that's exactly what I was gonna say. How high off the ground is that osprey nest?
Well, we'll try to put together some visualization that can help understand, you know, the impacts from adjacent buildings existing on Main Street, to give you an idea of what we're
Give us a
talking
place to
about.
put our Osprey camp.
Yeah,
To watch
that's right.
Ollie the Osprey.
There you go.
That's right. And Jason's back there, he's ready to do that. So with that, does anybody object to going to voting? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And opposed, motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. Any council announcements?
Hey, Sean, so you can, is Gloria back yet, or where's she at?
Lori? I'm not sure.
Lori's out at training.
Okay, oh, that's right, yeah, several of the administrative staff are at the same training.
Yeah, it's on the city software.
Okay, a month ago, I asked Mr. Klein if they would list who is and who isn't paying franchise fees. In other words, take the people that are competing with mining, just to throw them out. How many of them have a contract, how many of them don't? How many are paying their fees as they should, and how many of them aren't? Now, Mr. Klein said, I can't answer it because Gloria's not here. And I haven't got an answer yet, it's been a month.
Okay.
But if you could just kind of make a note.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Moore.
Yes, I just wanted to announce that we found out recently, I think it's probably partly common knowledge, but the Santa train will be back this year.
Yes.
It was going to be a thing of the past, but we have it back. There are two local engineer-capable type people, and we are getting some help from a couple of local retailers and a group that's bringing 10 volunteers, which sounds marvelous to me. And so the Santa train will be back on the 2nd of December at or about 1 o'clock in the afternoon.
Well, here's that train. Okay, excuse me. I guess we better adjourn because I'll start singing. So if somebody would end our evening, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And opposed, motion carries. Thank you, everybody.